The next thing we know, we're like negotiating and buying this little art gallery that had been running since 1976.
In Calgary.
So this was in 2004. And it wasn't a retail gallery. It was only sales to corporations, commercial sales. So we bought it. And I didn't know anything about art, like almost zero. But I was like, if I can learn how to run a freaking unit train, like from the coal mine to the port and back again, I'm pretty sure I can learn about art and how to sell art, because that's something I'm actually really interested in.
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 109. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Today's guest, I cannot wait to get into this one. We met under the coolest circumstances. I don't know if we'll talk about it, but yeah, this will be really fun.
It's very fortuitous how we met.
I agree. And just to now understanding what you're up to and that experience we had a couple weeks ago, that this is going to be a really fun one. So please name and who you are.
My name is Patti Dibski, and I am the owner of Gibson Fine Art, which is a Calgary-based fine art gallery, and Interior Living, which is an interior design store in Calgary. And also sell furniture. So,
what day was that when I was at your place? 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago, the 12th, January 12th.
January 12th. So January 12th, Patti invites me and Jody to this event, and it's Barney Bentall live in the gallery.
Right, the intimate experience.
Yeah, and I was... You don't know any of this, but I knew of Barney Bentall just because he's such an icon in Canadian music.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, it sounds awesome. And I wanted to go check out your space. So it was like this dual-headed thing. So anyways, got there. And it was like, you and I were texting after, but that was one of the most, you used the word mesmerizing. And I agree. It was one of the most, it was just this wild experience that I was not prepared for.
I know, and I was actually not prepared for how intimate it was. So I just found it I was sitting there and I was looking up at the top of my wall for some reason. And I just felt this, it was touching my soul in a way that's it sounds really hokey and it's hard to describe. But I felt this incredibly soulful, artful moment as he moved from the piano to the guitar and told his stories and back again.
It was...
yeah,
it's
and
not an exaggeration.
It's the energy in the room was so crazy, strong, and positive. I've never felt anything like that before, and I'm so happy to be part of that.
I explained. I forget who I told, but I was sitting. When I was sitting there listening to him, I was really tense for almost every strum of his guitar strings and every change in the song with his voice. I was on edge. I was just wound up tight. And then he would start singing the next verse, and then I would loosen up. And then I knew he was going to do something different. I got super tense. I could just feel my whole body, which was, I've never felt that before.
I know, and I've never been at a concert where I'm like, oh my God, please don't stop. Just keep going. When he did the encore, I was like, can you just go for 3 more hours? It was there was no sense of time for me during that period. It was just, I was the same as on the edge of my seat. And then when he read from his proposed show that he's working on and how he explained how he was nervous, there was this vulnerability there that I wasn't expecting.
He, when he was talking about that, how he was being nervous, he was kind of laughing at himself. I loved watching his eyes and his grin.
Yeah.
Because you knew he was just I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe I'm saying this out loud. It was... Yeah,
and that was the first time that I've heard that he's read that out loud, to an audience. And I didn't know when we booked him that it was going to be this dress rehearsal for his upcoming or the show that he thinks he might turn this into. I had no idea. So when he started talking about how he was going to try something on, I'm like, oh my God, what if it's weird? What if everybody's what did we come to?
Yeah.
And then from the minute that he started to read, I was wow, we're sharing in something very special.
He puts his glasses on.
Yeah.
It's just all of it was
so humble. That's what I think I didn't realize either.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was
67.
amazing. Yeah, he's turning 68.
When, to have that experience in your own space, what is that?
Well, I actually got teary. So again, when I was watching Barney and then I was looking up at the ceiling and looking at all the art around him, and we had very carefully curated the art in that section. So it sort of reflected his music and who we thought he is or it was. So yeah, I did. It was very emotional for me. And it was also very emotional to think that this is being shared with all these people around. And it wasn't a gallery event per se. It was an event where we wanted to bring people together. It was the coldest night of the year, and every single person who RSVP'd came. I was expecting like 20 people to not come because it was so cold, but every single person came.
Which is like...
Yeah.
Yeah, that one, I had to sit with that for a couple of days. That one really
got me.
That one got me.
Me too. And then I read your Instagram post, and I'm like, this is exactly how I felt. Like, you captured the essence of how I felt.
Yeah, it was really cool. So for that to be my first Patti experience, I was like,
they're not all like that.
Holy shit.
Can you imagine if I could like bottle that up and just like keep like producing these types of events? Yeah, I know. And now I'm like, oh my God, this was so good. Like, how am I ever going to replicate this? But I can't. I can't replicate it. So I'm going to have to do something different. And one of my goals for 2024 was to really activate my space. So not just for art shows and for events around art, but to really use the background of the art for other opportunities and other events, but all sort of tied into art some way.
Yeah.
And so Barney Bentel was the first one.
Well,
like kick it off.
Just like start at the highest possible
I know, totally.
Which will be, obviously it'd be impossible to recreate, but I think when you pitch people and they start explaining what they want to do, you'll know right away if there's a story
and now
there.
the bar is set so high that I'm going to have to be like, it's going to have to be so curated. Like, I'm going to have to think very carefully about the next event that I do. It'll be different, but it'll be highly curated.
Yeah. That was spectacular. I was like, I told a few people about it, and they're just like, because you say Barney Bentel, and they think like rocker,
I know,
big thing.
Totally.
And that's what I thought too. I had no idea what I was walking into, but then when you start telling people, it's hard to explain what it was to people that weren't there.
I know. And how he just seamlessly moved from guitar to piano to me was so beautiful too. Oh, yeah, I know.
Crazy.
Get chills just talking about it.
Well done.
Thank you.
So back to the show here.
Yes.
I think you've seen a couple of these.
I have.
So I like the guests to kind of go back as far as they want to go.
Okay.
You know, like how they grew up, where they grew up, you know, how their parents or their siblings inspired them. And we go through school and we'll just kind of work our way to where you are today. So I'm pumped to hear it because, you know, your creativity and art background obviously speaks to me. So yeah, take it back as far as you want to go.
So I was born in Vernon, BC, and my parents have been in the same house for 54 years, which is, I'm turning 54. So I grew up with an enormous amount of like stability, right? Like we didn't move around. We weren't that family, like moving from house to house or city to city. I was like same friends from elementary to high school to university, like a ton of stability in my like formative years.
Yep.
And I think that provided me this like base foundation that allowed me to launch as I did. But growing up in a small town, like honest to God, like when I graduated, I'm like, I got to get out of here. Like I'm not staying here. Like I have no interest in staying in Vernon and living in Vernon for the rest of my life. So I went to university and I did a degree in poli-sci and graduated in 4 years. But I went to university with all my Vernon friends. So it was very safe and it was very comfortable. So I always had this like, I don't want to say sheltered, but it wasn't very risky or what, like, I didn't know that I was a risk taker until I got out of that environment. So I went to university. I did a degree in poli-sci.
Did you always know, like, growing up that university was your thing?
Oh,
yeah. Poli-sci was your thing? Like,
no, I didn't know poli-sci was my thing, but I knew that I wanted to go to, there was really my parents were both teachers. So I grew up with, like, education is very important. University is very important. There was really no other option that I considered. It's not that I couldn't have considered. My parents would have supported that. Like I would say my parents provided like, again, this unconditional love, right? It was an enormous amount of stability. But I mean, when you're in a small town and there's no internet, like I'm like looking through university catalogs, like, I don't know, I like barely know outside of my province, right? I know Calgary and Edmonton, but you know, this is like in the 80s. I didn't really know the big, like wider world. And so I actually did a year at Okanagan College and I had a prof that taught poli-sci, and I just took poli-sci, like, I didn't know what poli-sci was, no idea, but I like social studies. So I took my first class in political science, and I was like, oh, I like this. Like, I like Canadian government. I like learning about how these institutions work and fit together, and how as a society we have to have these types of institutions. So then I went to UVic and I finished off my political science. And then I was like, well, that's a really like straight arrow into law. So I knew I wanted to go to law school, but between then I was like, I gotta go a little bit bigger. So there was this opportunity to go study Japanese, of which I actually took an undergrad as well. So I took a couple of Japanese classes, so I knew a little bit. And then I'd gone to Japan in between second and third year. So when I graduated, I knew I was going back to Japan because Japan was a major powerhouse at the time. Like it was this economic, like crazy place that people were going and it was like Nintendo and Sony and like all of these big companies, and the Japanese were buying up everything at the time. So it's like 1992.
Yep.
The yen was super strong. So I had this opportunity to go to a private language school in Japan. I'm like, okay, like what else am I going to do with political science degree? I was thinking my other option was I was going to go to Whistler and be like a lifty on the ski hill. Like was what I was also thinking about.
Yeah.
So I hopped on a plane. And I flew over to Tokyo and took the train down, and I got picked up by the owner of the private language school, and I lived there for 3 years. So I went to the private language school for a year and kind of taught part-time, and then the last 2 years I taught English full-time. So I had this really cool program that I ran for 3 years. I didn't run it myself, but I was part of it. It was called Ski ESL. And so at the time, as new recruits came onto a large, like multinational Japanese company, they did this program for new recruits. And so we had this program where we took them to Silver Star Mountain, which is in my hometown, for 2 weeks. And they lived with a homestay and they had ski lessons. So they lived with a homestay, they had ski lessons, and in the afternoon we taught them English.
Amazing.
So I did that for 3 years in a row. And then we did it in Banff one summer as well.
So from this like small town, not sheltered, but like your
sheltered.
Your experiences are within this
like we didn't really travel. Like I've been to Hawaii once, but you know, we weren't like, we certainly traveled. We had a motorhome and we traveled across Canada, but I wasn't like flying to Europe in the summer like some people.
Like everybody else. I get it. It was like,
we weren't that family. Like I wasn't taking like cooking lessons in Italy during the summer or anything.
No. So the idea of going to Japan, was it did it just feel right to you? Like,
it felt like the absolute right thing to do.
It's a big...
It was a big thing. And I was just went up like by myself, arrived there. Like I had like one suitcase. I didn't have the right kind of clothes. Like I didn't know that when I was working, like because I was also teaching part-time, I had to have like office clothes. And I arrived there with like shorts and jeans. And I'm like, oh my God, like how am I going to like go into this office and teach, right? I had to buy clothes.
Crazy.
So I didn't know. Like I just knew nothing. And that's kind of like the story of my life. Like I do things without really knowing what's ahead.
Yeah.
But it's good because then I sort of go in blind and then I just have to feel my way through.
Do you think though there's something in you that's just kind of guiding you towards that spot that you're trusting?
Yeah, like I think like the Japanese thing is my mom worked at Okanagan College in international education. And so she had this opportunity to send some students over to Japan like between my second and third year. And it was kind of this fluky thing. And had I not done that, I don't think I would have thought about going to Japan after university. So I'd been there for 6 weeks in this program to learn Japanese. And then as soon as I left there, I knew that when I graduated, I was going back. Like that was my goal as I got through university. Like I'm going to be a lifty or I'm going to go to Japan and work and learn Japanese.
Was it the culture or was it the people?
I just loved it there. I just absolutely loved it. It was the culture. It was the people. I know people say things about Japan, but for me, it was the best experience ever. So again, this is 1992 to 1995, and I lived in the country. And it was called a donchi, and it was a place where the employees of the company lived. So I was like right in with all the employees who I was teaching English. So it was this blonde head in this like sea of dark heads, right? And so at the time still, like it was not that usual to have foreigners in that part of Japan. So it was right at the base of Mount Fuji.
Amazing.
It was super cool. So I could look out my window in the morning and see Mount Fuji.
Like it's such a stretch from where you grow up.
Totally. But it was the right thing to do. And that, now I can say, like, you don't know your cumulative experiences and how they affect you. And you don't know at the time how that's going to affect me 20, 30 years down the road. But for me, that was the launching pad to like gain independence, gain confidence, gain experience, learn how to manage a situation where I'm uncomfortable and I don't know anything. Learn how to communicate without a language where I wasn't fluent.
All those like
Learn how to reach out if I didn't understand. So many good skills I learned from those 3 years that then I think I applied. Like I didn't see the benefit of that for maybe 10, 15 years later, but cumulatively it was the best thing I could ever have done.
When do you think you got to a point in your life where you could start looking back on everything and understanding that there's a reason that you had all these
40.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I feel like I feel almost the exact same way to them. It's the same year.
I think it's 40. It's interesting because I caught a snippet of your discussion with Paul Lavoie.
Oh yeah.
And I heard him say something like he'd gone to shy camp or something like
Shy
that.
school, yeah.
Shy school. And so I wasn't shy necessarily, but I was quiet. And I feel like I can really understand that, right? Like I don't think until I was 40 that I moved out of that being conscious or conscientious of the fact that I was quiet.
Were sports a thing when you were a youngster?
Yeah. I always did sports.
And like team sports, individual?
I did team sports, but mostly I was a runner. So I was on cross country and track and fields, and I played tennis. Yeah, so I was never like the best athlete at team sports, but I liked the individual sports.
Because then that kind of fits the quiet side too, right? You don't have to be...
Yeah. I mean, I had a lot of friends. Like I wasn't introverted necessarily when I was with my friends, but I was just a quiet personality. And I mean, I'm still like that. I would still say I lean towards introversion, but I'm a nurtured extrovert.
It's a great way to put it. Do you, being quiet, because I'm also quiet, so when I get thrown into a room, like with a lot of people, that's like kryptonite for me. I don't do well in those positions.
I know, likewise. And still to this day, and I tell my kids this who are going to be 21 and 23, like I still don't enjoy walking into a room where I know no one at my age, like at 54. And with experience behind me, I don't enjoy that.
Me neither.
I just don't.
Like so as soon as I walk into a room and I'm looking for some eyes that I know, so I can just be
and
like,
it's like you think that after all these years and all the various networking events that would be, it's like Barney Bentel saying he was nervous. I was like, how can you be nervous after like 3,000 performances? But it's the same thing. Like I still get this little like, do I want to go in there? Like who am I going to talk to? Like, where's the bar?
Quickly. Always. It's like a beeline to the bar, get a drink, look around, and then you're like, fuck, now I got to go find somebody.
I know, totally. So, I mean, still, all these years later, I don't really enjoy that. But if I'm there, like once I get into it, and if I have a glass of wine, and I find someone I know or recognize, then I'm okay. But it's not something I look forward to. Like, does anyone look forward to cold networking?
I think so. I think there's like...
Really? Like, I don't know. Like, I guess so.
There's a couple of people in my world that, when you start your own business, people are suggesting how to, they're giving you ideas of how to meet people.
Right.
Whether it's going to like, I don't know, chamber events or just like these like put on networking, and a couple of friends are like, you should go. They're amazing. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Like that's like my worst case scenario.
Like, I do not perform well in those situations.
I know. I like the one-on-one. I like the small group.
Yep.
Like if I'm at a party, I will and I know people, then I'll have a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, the networking, I still, all these years later, I don't enjoy it.
Do you go back to the start of this conversation, like the Barney Bentel night? That more comfortable though?
100%.
Hosting the party.
Yeah, because it's in my environment. Like it's all
world.
like in my space. Yeah, 100%.
Just like this.
And like talking before he came on, that is like no problem for me at all. And I don't mind talking in front of people. I just don't like the pure coldness of the networking event.
Yeah. That's the same shitty questions.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm not good at the like surface. I can do it, but I'm not good at, I don't enjoy the surface level like.
Yeah. Nonsense.
Yeah, or this sort of like the competitive thing, like who can be the funniest in a group. Like it's just not my thing.
Yeah, the hosting the party thing I feel is this.
Totally.
That's my unlock too.
Because you're in your own space, right? And it's comfortable.
Yep.
And you want people to be relaxed. So therefore I'm more effusive because I want people to be relaxed and enjoy the time.
Yeah, I agree. It's you kind of set the tone.
Yeah.
You know what you're walking
100%.
into. Yeah, that's like all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
This is like, this is comfortable because it's
totally
hosting the party.
Yeah, and it's intimate.
Yeah. So after Japan.
So I was all set to go to law school. So I like bought the LSAT book. And then I called a friend of mine who was actually at UVic going to law school. And I said, hey, I'm going to apply. I'm going to write my LSATs. And he's like, Patti, do you like the law? I'm like, that's a good question. I never really thought about that. And he's like, because if you don't love the law, I'm going to suggest you don't go to law school because you have to be very interested and passionate about it. And I was like, I don't really even know anything about the law. Like, maybe I don't love the law. And then there was a girl who was also teaching English with me, and she was doing her MBA at McGill. And again, being from a small town, like, I didn't even know what an MBA was. So I'm like, what's an MBA?
There's no Google.
I know, there's no Google. And there's like no catalogs of information, right? Yeah. So she was telling me about this MBA program. I'm like, oh God, that sounds interesting. Like, I think I could really get into business. Like, I think that would be super fascinating for me. And I thought I could be in HR because I like people. I like to talk to people. I like, solving those types of problems. So I applied to all these schools, and I got into U of C was the first school that I got into. And I'm like, well, I think I'll go to Calgary because, it's close to home and I can ski and I've been away. But I didn't know anything about the program. So I got there the very first day of the MBA program, and they're like, well, welcome to your MBA in enterprise development. And I'm like, I didn't even know what that means. Like, what is enterprise development? And so for a couple of years, U of C did an MBA that was focused on enterprise development. So it was like for small business owners or people wanting to start a business.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, like, I don't want to start a business. Like, I'm like from school teachers, like, we got like consistent salaries, like, I don't want to be that person who has to worry about, like, where's my next paycheck? I want a job. I want a corporate job with an expense account. So I was like the anti-enterprise development person through the entire MBA program because I just wanted a corporate job, which I got after school. And I worked for CN Rail for 7 years. And I got into this program where they took 20 people from across Canada, 20 MBAs. And they, for 2 years, you tried out different positions within the company. And the idea was then to kind of fast track you into like leadership roles. So I did that for 2 years, and I got a job in Calgary. And then I had 2 boys, and I was like, I don't know if I like this world of like, I was in marketing, of travel, and like, it sounds silly to say, but it was fun at the time when you don't have kids. Yep. But it was a lot of like dinners out and golf games and blah, blah, blah.
No, going back to the quiet thing.
I know, right?
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, right? And so I was like, and then there's the railroad, right? I'm like, I didn't really get excited about this. Like, am I going to really spend the rest of my life like working for the railway where your customers are captive and they hate you?
Did you, when you got the job though, did you feel like you had reached a, like you're happy you got this thing?
Oh,
like
yeah.
you'd reached this level.
Like I was like, oh my God, I'm from my little town and like I got this great job and I'm traveling like all over like North America. And I became the account manager of coal for Canada, which is a weird thing to say now. And I was the only woman in my whole department, and I was like under 30. I was young, and so I was like just feeling really good about life.
Yeah, like how, like to get in these programs, like there's 20 people. Did you have to be one of the best students?
Yeah.
So you were a high performer.
Yeah. It's a high performer.
Is that an understatement?
I don't know how you say that without making it sound like totally obnoxious.
No, but you were like, obviously you had the marks, the skill set to get into this program.
I think a lot of it was, personality too. Like they were looking for a particular type of person that they could kind of mold and turn into, ultimately into like a leadership position.
Yep.
But yeah, you had to give good marks. So
when does it change? When does it change when you're like at this job?
Yeah.
You're young. There's all these checks.
Yeah.
All these things you think you want.
Yeah. That's exactly what it was. It was like I was just checking off the boxes.
Yeah. And checking off boxes that were just there's these imaginary boxes that you're feeling pressure from outside. You
know what? I can actually say that it was like internally generated pressure. So I put that pressure on myself. Like nobody actually ever, I just certainly didn't have that pressure from my parents. And I didn't have that pressure externally. It was always like wanting to be more. Like I just wanted more. I wanted to be outside of how I grew up. And not that it was a bad way. I just didn't want that.
Yep.
So I built all the boxes to be checked. And then I really went through and checked them all as best I could, right? But, had it been a different industry, like let's say I got hired into oil and gas or something I was a little more interested and passionate about, maybe I would have stayed. Maybe I wouldn't be sitting here right now. But because it was the railway and I was like, oh my God, like it's not that exciting, especially because I was in coal, which is like now you don't even want to talk about.
Yeah, it's
right?
dirty.
It's like a dirty word.
Yeah.
So like imagine if I would have stayed in that. Yeah, and I'd done really well there as a young female.
Which even that, how to say that, like it's such a different time, right?
I know.
But that being said, there's still that part of the world too right now.
Yeah, 100%.
But back then though, that must have been.
Yeah, it was unusual for sure. Very unusual. Like some people were like, why did she get that job?
Well, it's like being in Japan.
Yeah.
This blonde head
totally.
around all these dark like heads.
So then I decided that I had to work. Like I knew I couldn't be a full-time stay-at-home mom. I respect all women who make that choice, but it wasn't the choice for me. Like I'm like, my mind is like a racehorse, right? Like I'm like, I have to do something. I would have been cleaning my baseboards with a toothbrush. Like I would have been that person. And I probably would have been crazy and drove my kids crazy and my whole family crazy, right? So I'm like, I got to do something.
Yeah.
So I had met this woman at this mom and babies group and we were like, well, let's buy a business together rather than start a business. And she was a lawyer. So we found this little art gallery online and we looked at like probably 20 businesses we did do, like from chocolate making to like garbage bin containers. Like we looked at so many different little businesses for sale. And then we kind of stumbled on this little art gallery.
How did that conversation start? Because
obviously
I have no idea.
We
what
were
these
like,
classes
I think
look
we were getting a pedicure, as weird as that sounds. And she was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to go back to my corporate job as a lawyer. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I want to, because we were both on mat leave, back to my job in the railway. And so it just started at that little tiny seed. And then, when you get momentum or inertia, like it just kept going and going and going and going. And the next thing we know, we're like negotiating and buying this little art gallery that had been running since 1976.
in Calgary.
So this was in 2004. And it wasn't a retail gallery. It was only sales to corporations, commercial sales. So we bought it. And I didn't know anything about art, like almost zero. But I was like, if I can learn how to run a freaking unit train, like from the coal mine to the port and back again, I'm pretty sure I can learn about art and how to sell art because that's something I'm actually really interested in.
The alignment with her, was it just like timing, two high performers?
It was absolute perfect timing. She only stayed a year and then she actually went back to law because she was like, I don't think this is for me. And I'm like, this is for me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That, how did you know? How'd you know it was for you, like that first year?
I loved it. From the minute I started, I just was in love with the idea of having complete control and freedom over my time and what I was doing. And just like I got on the plane to Japan without knowing anything or even where I was going, I got into the art gallery without really understanding what I was going to be doing. Like was 100% sales, right? And for an introvert, that's tough sometimes, right? And I didn't know anything about art.
Like there's a lot of reasons not to do
zero. Yeah.
So what was the tipping point to say yes? Were you guys looking at numbers specifically?
I think it was numbers. It was lifestyle. It was that it was interesting. It was like cooler than having a garbage bin company. Can't even remember what else we looked at, but we went to due diligence on a whole bunch of companies. And again, when you sort of get moving and then the next thing you know, I'm like writing a check. Like it was just like, it was such a fast process. And the negotiation with the existing owner. And as soon as we started like rolling along, it's like it didn't stop itself until we were like walked in the door and like, oh my God, we own this little art gallery.
What'd that feel like? Do you remember that feeling after you get the keys?
I don't ever remember feeling scared, but I remember feeling like I gotta learn, like I gotta dig in now.
Which, as a high performing human, it's not a mountain you can't climb.
No, and I like to learn. And so we hired this guy who had just moved here from New York. He was an art critic and an artist, and then he ended up actually working at Alberta University Arts. I think he's still there. I won't say his name. And we hired him, and he tutored us for 3 hours once a week.
Cool.
And so he would bring in our assignments, and we'd have to do them. And it was very academic. Mm-hmm. And so it was sort of like getting a degree in art history, like an intensive degree in art history. And because it was now my business and my livelihood, I was like, I got to learn. Like, I'm like, and of course the internet was around, and I'm like looking and reading, and just like, it's just like a sponge. Like as much as I could possibly learn, I wanted to learn. Because how could I, because if I didn't learn it, I'd fail, and I wasn't going to fail. I'm like, I am not failing.
What year was this when you bought it?
2004.
Okay. What do you think the difference was between your partner leaving after a year and you're like all in and still doing it?
I mean, I certainly can't speak for her, but I think that, well, first of all, it was like oil and gas was going like this, right, at the time. And she was in oil and gas as a lawyer. And so the opportunity, probably the pull was so strong for her. Like she left there and went to be like general counsel somewhere, right? So, she was going to make like 20 times what we're making at the art gallery, right? And so I think for her, she was like, this isn't quite like, I mean, we got to take out the garbage and we got to we had no help. It was just the two of us, and we had a little office, and we had to pick up the phone and call people, and we had to hang all the art and move it around. And it was a very physical job, and it still is a very physical job. So I think that she was kind of like, sure, this is like where I want to be when I can go back into oil and gas and, make a significant difference in pay. And also work, right? Like I'm not taking out the garbage when I'm in that type of job.
And what do you think it was for you? I think you touched on it, but just this, it was your own thing?
Yeah, it was just exciting because it was new and it was different. And I grew to really love the art and the artists. And I thought it was I instantly had this stable of artists who I had to get to know, and I had to understand them as people, and I had to understand how they painted and their content. And it was so much human information I had to gather in order to then go out and try and sell that art. So it was super fascinating. It was and coming from the railway where I was like, nobody's listening that's hired me. No.
It doesn't fill you up.
Yawn. Yeah, it did not. I was like a flower wilting, like a wilted flower. And then here I was I was getting sun and water and light, and I felt like I was still stressed, right? I mean, it was hard, make no mistake, but it filled my soul, like the Barney Bentel thing. I'm like, oh, this is for the soul, and art is for the soul.
I agree.
So then I became passionate very quickly about what I was doing. And as we know, when you like what you're doing, you work harder, you learn faster.
It's such a cliche, obviously.
Yeah, it is a cliche, and it's a tired cliche, but in my case, it actually worked. Yeah.
Do you, the idea of taking that chance to buy a gallery when it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Made no sense on any level.
Yeah, there's nothing in your past that speaks to this direction.
One art history class at UVic.
So what is it? What do you think like you said, it's like going to Japan. There's these little,
I know. I think my greatest strength is I don't know my weaknesses. I think that's my best strength. Is I have this ability to take risk without really. I mean, I always take calculated risk. I don't take stupid, crazy risk, but I take calculated risk. So I think at the time I calculated if it failed, which failure wasn't. I remember saying out loud I'm not going to fail. I remember someone saying to me, well, what if it doesn't work? Oh, it is going to work. This is not an option here. I will make it work. Yeah. So I think when I looked at the risk and I calculated it, I think I thought at the time that it wasn't so great that I was worried about the downside.
Gotcha. And what about, I'm guessing you have a serious work ethic?
Yeah.
So that's also in there too, right?
Yeah.
Understanding the risk, but then understanding, the idea of failure is not.
Wasn't an option. Yeah.
So it's just work.
Yeah. Exactly. And I did work hard. I still work relatively hard.
It doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't go away. So, and I was excited about it.
So what's the transition? How long that lasts, and where does it take you?
So that was 2004. So then in 2009, so my lease was coming up in 2009.
Where was this gallery?
This one was on 16th Ave, across from that Tompkins Park, on the second floor. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't a retail gallery. I was just a commercial gallery. And in my mind, I would go to these corporations and I would put together these art proposals, but nobody knew who Gibson Fine Art was because there wasn't a retail presence. There wasn't a brand to speak of. And so in my head, I was like, I need to create a brand. I need to create a brand so that when I go in and I talk to law firms, accounting firms, oil and gas companies, people are like, oh, I know that. Or I can go on your website, or I can go on it's no social media then.
Yep.
But I was aware that I had to do more to build this brand to help me in the commercial sales. So then I decided to move to 11th Avenue, which at the time there was, I think, 10 art galleries. So it was like Gallery Row. And I took over the space from Kensington Fine Art. They were shutting down. And so I gutted the whole place and I built it all out, and it wasn't a huge space. It was only 2,000 square feet, but I made it kind of lofty. Like I put in this brick and a little kitchen and wood floors, and I made it into a retail gallery. And so that was kind of the start of the retail gallery. And I knew that I didn't want to do that until my kids were in school, because then it was going to be more committed hours. So and then I got this other stream of business, which was the retail side. So I had the commercial side, and now I had the retail side of business, which to me just sort of made more sense.
And when you had the retail side, did you feel like you actually had a brand? Like there's something that people could recognize?
Well, and I had to build that. And then I'm like learning marketing. And even though I have an MBA, I was like, I don't remember anything from marketing class. And it was like a lot of time before that.
What was your move back then to build your brand?
Oh gosh.
And were you using that word back then? Like the
word
brand?
100%. I was using brand. And when I thought of the brand, like when you think of brand essence, right? Like that's the absolute, like, what does this brand mean? I wanted Gibson Fine Art to be a place that you could come in and you could feel comfortable. I didn't want it, and I purposely didn't build the gallery with a whole bunch of big white walls. Like voluminous. I wanted it to be more intimate and comfortable, so that it was a space that anybody could walk into and ask questions, and we would always greet you. We would always, ask you how you are. We would always say, we're here to answer any questions you want. So I wanted it to be comfortable and familiar. And so the stat I found out is that only 2% of the population will go into an art gallery in the city in which they live. So I was like, how do I get more than 2% of the people into my gallery? So I did all sorts of crazy shit. Like I had pop-up galleries all over the city. So my idea was to pop up these galleries to make you aware of Gibson Fine Art in a place that was not a gallery, so that then you might want to come over to the gallery and visit sometime. I did like art collecting 101. Like I did you name it, I have done it.
So all rooted in community.
Yeah.
You putting yourself in different communities
100%.
and just putting yourself out there over and over.
Over and over again.
And over.
And then at that point, I kind of started all my board work. So I was on the board for 6 years of Calgary Arts Development. And then I was on the board of Art a la Carte, which is an organization that put art into acute care cancer patient rooms. Oh God, I don't even remember. And then I was on the art committee at the Ranchman's Club, and then I sat on AU Arts for 6 years, and I was the outgoing vice chair. So I just came off that board. So I kind of put together this plan, like my not-for-profit work, which I really strongly believe as a business leader or a business person, you should be committing a portion of your time to community development or community building. I believe very strongly in that. And then I had all of these other activities outside the physical gallery to create awareness of the gallery itself. And then I was a big believer in digital marketing. So I had a website
early.
I was like one of the first people to ever have a website. First galleries, for sure.
So that, like that
and I had a blog. And I had every little,
you did it.
Everything that you could do. I was like, what can I do? Like where, and I always scan my competitive environment. Like I'm always looking, not even within Calgary, but like the whole world. Like what are other people doing?
Just to take note and then
take note and then try it out.
right.
Like I've had a bazillion failures, like a bazillion. But I just like, all right, that didn't work. Try again.
This is like a 101 in how to like start something.
I know.
Because it's like
so many failures. Lots.
And when you say failures, do you mean
Well, things that just totally flopped.
there's initiatives that you thought were going to
like I
kick?
did a pop-up thing in Suncor Energy Center, and I had a space and I got all set up as a total flop. And then I would, I was at Pinebrook Golf Course. Like I just did all these things and I was trying to put art everywhere with my little tags.
Yep.
With Gibson Fine Art, where people would see the art, like art to the people.
Yep.
I did billboards. Like I had billboards all over the city for a while.
Wow.
I know, right? Like I'm
Did you
just
ever do
like
bus benches?
I didn't do bus benches.
Good, thank God.
But I did do billboards, and that was a giant waste of money. That was a flop too.
Why I love this conversation is just like the approach of building a brand. It
Yeah.
gets lost on
Yeah.
so many people.
Yeah.
They feel like it's just this like lever that you like pick your font, your color, and your
Yeah.
logo, and you have a
Yeah.
brand. But the way you're approaching this of your
like I
three
think of the
things-
core, like
Yeah.
what's the essence? Like just like we talk about our authentic self, overused, but people do talk about it. I'm like, what's the authentic nature of my art gallery? Like who are we? Who do we want to be? And then it kind of all comes out from there.
Yeah, but it's like a shit ton of work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like these pop-up events.
Yeah. It was so much work. Yeah.
Because you do your thing all day.
I know.
And then usually it's like evenings or weekends.
I
and you do-
know. It was stupid. Yeah. But I think in the end, some of my biggest corporate clients I met because I was in the lobby of Husky Energy Building. And then I was in Petrocan for years, like every year doing these like shows. Yeah.
Like,
I put art in the Glencoe. Like I had my art up. Like it's just anywhere that I thought it would reach the people,
Yep.
I put art up.
and it's not glamorous work.
No. Oh, I'm like, you should see my car. I got levels and hammers and like I'm still hauling a toolkit and levels around in the elevators across Calgary.
That's where I think there is a disconnect between like what makes a business, how businesses are successful,
Yeah.
to the ones that aren't. It's all that's like
Yeah.
this
Like I
ugly
wash the
work.
floors. Like, I mean, I am not above anything. I will do anything to make it work.
So what happens? So
So, okay. So I have the gallery. So I'm there. So I'm building the brand 2009 to 2013, working really hard. And then I meet this guy. I hang art in his home. And he's like, yeah, I got this furniture store. And I'm like, I'm thinking about selling it. And I was like, oh, because I always thought of like, I'm going to have this little empire. Like I didn't know what it was going to be, but it was all going to be somehow vertically related. So then I was like, well, that's interesting. So the next thing I know, here again, I'm buying a furniture store. So I'm negotiating with this owner who had the furniture store. Very difficult negotiation, for the record. And we're buying a furniture store. I don't know a single thing about furniture. Like not a single thing. Nothing.
but you
Zero.
could appreciate how important it was with art.
I knew that it fit into my vertical strategy.
Right.
Sorry, not vertical. Oh my God. Horizontal. I said vertical twice now. Horizontal strategy. And I knew that when I was going into people's homes and hanging their art, they had just bought a new sofa. Or they were going to buy a new sofa. Or like, because I like to go into people's homes and hang the art. Like I take the art in my minivan and I will bring it to your home and I'll hang it for you. Because I like that interaction. Again, it's that one-on-one connection that I really crave. So it was like, this is an interesting opportunity because it fits very nicely with my art. And the kind of art that I sell was sort of in the same vein as the type of furniture that I was looking at this furniture store. So like every gallery has their own sort of niche where they play.
Yeah.
And so what the type of artist and the price point of art that I had was a good fit with this style of furniture. So then I had a furniture store.
How long did it take you to connect those dots between like this guy's selling and I'm like, this is a good idea?
I feel like that was like February
Yeah.
and I took the furniture store September 1st.
So it's a quick.
Yeah, it was
You
quick.
realized that it was
Yeah.
there.
I think we started negotiating in the spring and I closed, it was mine September 1st.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So then where does it go?
So then I was like, oh my God, now I got a furniture store and I know nothing about furniture.
Physical location somewhere?
It was 10th Ave, 1126 10th Ave. So right across from Co-op. So exactly 1 kilometer from the gallery. So both in the Beltline. So it was pretty close.
Yep.
There was staff that was like a total savior because they had to teach me. So I go into this furniture store and it's been around since same as the gallery, 2004, oddly. But it's all paper. Like everything's on paper. Like everything's written. Like all the invoices are written. And so the first thing I did, and I did this in the gallery too, the first thing I did was I put in systems. Even back in 2004, there was this really archaic system. I think it was called Gallery Express. So that was the first thing I did was put in digital systems. So the inventory and the invoicing and the website was all run off the same platform. And so from 2004 to now, I've been through like 4 or 5 different systems for the gallery, but I love my systems. Like that keeps me organized.
Yep.
So I went into the furniture store. That's the first thing I did. I put a system, like an electronic system in place to run it. So purchase orders, everything that you need to do, get rid of all the paper. And then it was a bumpy road. And then I'm back in, like I'm like knee deep in like, how do you make a sofa? Like what differentiates a good sofa? Like what are the different types of fabrics? Like all of these things that I just had no clue. So like I'm like swimming, like I'm like working 7 days a week, 15 hours a day. Like I can barely keep my head above water. I'm like dying. And this woman who I sold art to, she was an interior designer. She heard that I'd bought the furniture store and she said, can I take you out for lunch? And I said, sure. And so we went out for lunch and she said, would you be interested in a partner? And I'm like, oh God, over my dead body. Because I'd already had a partner. Like, I'm not going through that again. And she was just very persistent. And then we went together to this furniture market in High Point, North Carolina, which happens twice a year. And I'm like, well, this will kind of be a test. Like, we'll go to this furniture market, and if we get along, and, you know, then I'll think about it. So we got on the plane, and honest to God, we didn't stop talking from the minute we got onto the plane to 5 days later when we're back in Calgary. So I'm like, she's the one. Like, it was like finding your life partner, right? Like, is it going to fit? And so she became a partner June of 2014.
Okay.
Just like saved me. And that was like the best thing that ever happened to me.
Do you think the idea of building your own thing, and this is me talking because this is what I'm dealing with. The idea of building your own thing there's a lot of pressure, but there's a lot of, you know, it's your vision, it's your direction.
Right,
you can see it,
right.
you can feel it, you can make all the moves, the finance piece, you like, you know, you do all the work, you get all the rewards. Like there's all those pieces.
Right.
The minute you decide to partner with somebody, and you obviously you realize that your income gets dropped.
Yeah.
And like there's all these other things. Do you think that there is value in a partnership? Obviously, like there's like because you were sure.
I was 100%
and then all
sure.
of a sudden you're not. So what do you think that like?
So for me, she was 100% value add. She wasn't value takeaway. So I say, and I will say it out loud to anyone who will listen. Her name is Suzette Taves. She is the best thing that ever happened to me. And we are yin and yang. We have like very complementary skills. And I think it's just a total, it's not like this often, but it worked in our case where I do my thing, which is more behind the scenes in the marketing. And she's front facing and she's the designer. And she knows way more about furniture than I do. So I could see she was only going to bring value. And we structured the shareholder agreement in a way that incented her to create value. And when I say value, I mean revenue. So that was another way that I did it. Like I wanted her to feel motivated to add to this business in terms of top line revenue, which she did in spades.
So I'm guessing without her,
I don't know where I'd be, honest to God.
It doesn't scale to where it is, right?
No, would I, if she always was like, oh, Patti, you would have figured out. You would have hired somebody, blah, 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 blah. But when I look back, I'm like, I don't know what I would have done. Like I wasn't desperate, but I was going to probably be pretty desperate at some point. And would I have figured it out? Maybe. But she is 100% value creation as a business partner.
Still with you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. She is like, as soon as she wants to sell, I'm selling. Like, I'm like, I am not running this without you. Like, that's how strongly I feel about our partnership.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's like one of those stories where, and I've had the other opposite story. It's one of those stories where you're like, yeah, it just worked out.
Is it rare? Like you,
I think so.
I don't talk to enough people to know.
Yeah. I think it's rarer than not. Is that a word? Rare?
Yeah. I have no vocabulary, so
Not
whatever
as
you
rare?
say, I'm like, oh yeah, sure.
Medium rare. So I think that. Yeah, I think so. And it's not that we work really hard at trying to be good partners, like you do in a marriage. It's just it's a question of fit. It just was the right thing at the right time.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yes.
Game changer.
Yeah. Major game changer.
So what happens then?
Then we run that business. We get into the pandemic, so then the property, this is my big thing about. So then we hit 2014, 2015, valuation of all the businesses downtown falls. Like the city's losing, I don't know, billions of dollars in tax revenue. So what do? They revalue all the businesses in the Beltline. All the buildings, I should say, not businesses. So they revalue all the buildings in the Beltline. So my little building that I was in interior living, and I'm a tenant, goes from a valuation of $9 million to $29 million in a year. So if you think about my commercial tax rate, it was like through the roof. So we had like 2 years of major fights with the city about, so all like our revenue was going to commercial taxes for that period of time. It was awful. So we were appealing the tax, and it was happening with the gallery too. It was just awful. So, and all these businesses are going under because I was paying like, I don't know, $100,000 a year in commercial property taxes between the two businesses. It was nuts. So finally, that was a real challenge, right? Like that was one of our biggest challenges. Like, how do we make this work with our commercial property taxes so high? It's a very large portion of our monthly lease payment. Then the taxes go down. Then the pandemic happens. And so we were closed for 66 days.
Wow.
And
still had two buildings.
Two buildings. I'm like freaking out because I'm like, how do I pay my rent? And it was awful. Like that was probably the most stressful time of my whole life because I had these two huge lease payments to make and no revenue coming in. And I'm like, nobody knows what's going to happen. I know it was stressful for everybody, but it's particularly stressful for small business owners.
66 days.
66 days we were closed.
What do you, the swing in during those 66 days, like, is it like, were you able to come up with ideas?
Oh yeah. So I was like, oh my God, like kinetic, manic energy, right? Like I'm like awake all night. So I changed my whole gallery website. So I made it so that before you couldn't put the art in a cart and buy it online.
Yeah.
And so then I'm like, I need a new system. So I got a new system. So I got this system of e-commerce for the gallery.
Yeah. What'd you build it with?
It's called Art Logic. It's a system out of the UK.
Like a gallery specific?
Yeah, very gallery specific.
Awesome.
So I'm like, I'm changing my system so you can put your art in your cart and you buy it online. Like if we're all sitting at home, I want you. And so it was the first gallery in Calgary to do that.
No way.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like
but you were
like even across Canada, if you looked at the galleries, there weren't very many where you could put it in a cart and buy it online. And then with interior living, I went in and we photographed the whole store, like every single piece of furniture, cushion, like during that 66 days. And we put everything online, put it in your cart and buy it. So it was like what that forced me to do is digitize or like introduce e-commerce in a way I hadn't before.
Yeah.
Which is actually really interesting.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I was there every day at both. But like it's not like I was sitting at home making bread. Like I was at both businesses every day during that 66-day period.
The idea of digitizing it, did it feel like a natural move? Like
it felt like a desperate move. Like I felt like I have no choice. I have to do something to respond to this environment that we're in.
It's interesting having these conversations with people about the pandemic. So I started my business in October 19.
Okay. Of
2019.
Okay. Ooh.
So March then.
Yeah.
But it's weird because like I have a digital business, right?
Yeah.
So it was this weird thing where I was still working with people because they needed to go online or they needed to 100%,
right?
refine their brand online. So it was like, but when you talk to people like you that have this like these bricks and mortar locations, foot traffic, I don't want to say I forget about it.
Yeah.
But I kind of do forget
I know.
how intense
I
and how
know.
traumatic it was.
Yeah, because if you have a job, I mean,
Yeah.
everybody had some time off, right?
Yep.
But you still can do your job, right? You're still employed, most people anyway, and you're doing your job from home.
Yep.
Where I was like, if I can't sell anything and I got like $30,000 a month minimum in lease payments, like, what am I going to do?
Runway is.
Yeah. Yeah, right? And like, what if we don't open up until September?
Yeah.
So during that time, Suzette and I were like, we're going to buy a building. We are going to buy a building in the Beltline. And my dream was always to bring the businesses together. So I was lining up the leases from both spaces so that they ended at the same time or in and around the same time, which was October 2020. Both business leases were up. So we put in so many crazy offers and so many crazy buildings and so many crazy lots in the Beltline, and nothing was working out. And we actually had an offer that we were going to sign off and close on the lot on 11th Ave and 14th Street. It's just a big empty lot there.
I'm on the hunt for buildings, so you're like, I'm really thinking about.
And we were going to close on that,
right
and
beside
then
the little white building. Like
it's right beside Sunil Cameras.
Yeah.
So we had a plan, we had an architect, we were going to build there. We were going at noon to sign off on the offer. Well, it was actually going to be not even an offer, but the purchase agreement. And Suzette and I went there because we were going to take one photo of ourselves, like jumping in the air, like, here's our lot. And we get there and there's all these like kind of zombies walking around. I'm like, why is this all these zombified people walking around on this lot, like in front of the Sunil Camera building? Like, what's going on here? I'm like, oh my God, it's like a methadone clinic. So we go into the pharmacy. Yeah, it is.
Crazy.
And so we're like, we can't put a high-end art gallery in a furniture store right here. Like nobody told us, like the realtor, nobody ever said there was a methadone, I don't know if that's the right word, but there's some kind of clinic next door. So we didn't sign. So we just let it all fall apart. Thank God. So nothing was working out. And then finally we found this warehouse in Manchester Business Park. And we're like, well, it's kind of a weird area, but there's still lots of kind of building related places down there, like Robson Lighting and Julian Tile and Empire Kitchen. So we're like, well, what if we could make that work? So we're like, okay. So this was like July of 2020. And so everything was, oh shit, sorry.
You're good.
Swear.
No, you're good.
Everything was like this, right? Like all the lease rates were in the dump. Building prices were down, which is why we wanted to buy. So we negotiated this warehouse for a 10-year lease. We would do all the leasehold improvements, but we'd have really low lease rates. And we're like, oh my God, finally. So we closed the deal. We got in there September 6th. I won't even talk about this part, how we did it. But we moved in there, both businesses, December 1st. So we there was nothing in there but the cinder block walls and the concrete floor. We had to do all the HVAC, all the plumbing, all the electrical, the entire build out. So Suzette designed it all because she's a space planner. And then we just worked our asses off to get it done. And because it was sort of this little bit of a lull, we were able to get trades.
Because they were making up for the time they couldn't work.
Yeah. So we like hired everybody September and paid them like right away. We said, we'll pay it. Like, we don't even care. Like, this has to get done because our leases were up and we had to move out of our space and into this new space by December 1st. So it was crazy. I won't say anything about building permits. Or lack thereof.
All the business survived obviously during the pandemic.
Yes.
After the 6 days, and it's just managing the up and down.
And so we had our best years through that pandemic time. Once we were back open again.
Because you could get foot traffic and digital?
Because everybody's sitting at home.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh my God, I have never noticed how ugly my sofa is. Right? Like, I hate my dining room table.
Right.
Because I've never had the time to sit here and look at it. Or I now have like X number of dollars of disposable income because I'm not going to Europe for the summer. So I'm going to buy a piece of art. I'm going to buy something that has some longevity. Yeah. So that was our busiest year on both businesses.
So the building you're in right now, is that the one that you?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. That's it. So then the dream was to put both businesses in the same space, which we did.
What does that actually feel like?
It feels so good.
And how long have you been thinking about that?
I've been thinking about that since 2013.
Since you bought the furniture?
Yeah.
You knew right away that
I knew that I wanted them to be in the same space.
Yep.
Yes.
So 7 years.
Yes, because I was on it and I knew how the leases, so I worked the leases to line up at the same time. And it took that long for them to line up.
Did you think it would take that long to get a building and get everything under one roof?
No.
So what does that feel like?
It was
do you feel like you're missing out? Do you feel like you're like what is it?
like when they were in different spaces.
Yeah, and you knew what the vision was.
Yeah.
But you knew that
I know,
like there wasn't an opportunity.
It was such a long process. Like to try to buy a building is such a long. I had no idea how hard that is.
Yeah.
And that was another massive learning curve. Like we got to learn how to negotiate these contracts and how do you look at a building and determine if it's economically feasible? Like we're building out all these spreadsheets. But I couldn't have moved any earlier because my interior living lease went to 20. Like when I bought the business, it was on a 10-year lease and it was 3 years in.
Right.
So I couldn't have
You had
moved
your
out
7.
till 2020. So I knew I had to be there till then. I couldn't break the lease. I could have, but it would cost me a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I just kept extending the gallery lease to line up.
So how have you been looking at growing all this? Like the gallery world? Like what's the push? Like how do you, so
That's a really good question.
you and I talked quickly off was like community. Barney Bentel is like this like community driver.
Right.
Goes back to the same idea of like pop-up events, all these things you've done before.
Right.
Is it?
You know what I think where I think the growth is? It's like the world. Like the world is my marketplace. Because art you can ship anywhere and all over the world. And so for me, I have to maintain a quality of artists or a range of artists that people are interested in. But now I'm looking not just within Calgary, and I certainly do still believe in activation of my space, which I have been trying to do the last 2 years. But now I'm looking at like, how do I sell art into the US? Because it's so easy. And then beyond that, how do I sell art into other markets?
Yeah.
Because I can send you a video of the art. I've got all these so now I have an augmented reality tool on my website. So you can actually scan in your wall and then the art gets put onto your wall. I can send you like high-res files of close-ups of the art. Like I can FaceTime, which I do quite frequently, FaceTime people who want to see the art who aren't in Calgary. So that's kind of my next big thing. Like the Calgary market is only so big. The Calgary art market is only so big. And I do want to attract younger buyers. So I'm working on that. That's always been a strategy it's like a cycle, right? Because the younger buyer just keeps cycling. But I'm looking at a much bigger marketplace.
Leveraging technology.
Yeah. Like how do I get into that marketplace, right? Like I get ads all the time on my Instagram from galleries in London, galleries in California. And if there's something that catches your eye, you just put it in your cart and then I ship it to you. And art moves duty free pretty much across the whole world.
Were you always like ahead on tech?
Yeah, like that's kind of my thing.
Always?
Yeah, definitely.
Naturally, you think? Or just like...
I think because I thought I had to be. Like that was a competitive advantage. Tech and systems, like how to run the two businesses as digitally as like I hate paper. As digitally as possible. So that there's nothing gets lost. Especially on the furniture side, because somebody orders, you got to do a purchase. Like there's so much detail there in numbers and codes that it should all be digital.
I find it's like the leveraging tech to like push everything forward. It's not a must, but it seems like you have to adapt.
Yeah.
Or you get kind of left behind.
Yeah. The furniture is really hard when you're a boutique furniture store because I can't really have you buy your furniture online.
Yeah.
Because there's like 3,000 iterations off one sofa.
Right.
So I decided a while ago that I am not going to try and make my website shoppable except for the clearance product, which is on the floor. So our sweet spot at interior living is like customer service, the design of your space. So the design of your living room, the touch and feel of the fabric, you sitting in the chair. It's like we want people to come in and we want them to have an experience with us where we help them put together a space. So it's very tactile. It's very visual.
Makes so much, it like makes so much sense, obviously.
So I gave up on the dream of having an e-commerce site for interior living. It just
doesn't work.
It's not the business model.
Have you, when you got into your 40s and you could kind of look back and like think about all the different things you've done, experiences you've had, and why they all make sense and they go together?
Yeah.
Where you are right now, could you have ever pictured this?
Never.
Like,
I think I wanted to be a lawyer. And then I wanted to work in a big corporation. So no, I never, like if you would have asked me like fresh out of university at 22, what I thought I'd be doing at 54, no, I never, because I didn't even know that was a possibility. I think now everybody, like the world is everybody's possibility, right? We all see the world all day long. But when I grew up, we didn't see the world like that. We couldn't see it.
Yeah, there was no reference. Like you literally, there was only a few jobs.
Yeah,
like,
and you had like catalogs. Like, how did I even know what was possible to take in university, right? I'm like dialing in my course selections, right? Like you're just getting whatever you can on the dial-in.
Yeah. Do you think the idea of like being an entrepreneur and like having that courage or the vision or whatever it is to do it, do you think everybody has that?
No. I think we're all wired differently. 100%. It's a level of risk you have to be comfortable with.
Yeah.
I mean, I never considered myself a risk taker ever. Like if you would ask me like, I don't know, up until 35, 40, but I can, when I look back, I can see that I'm comfortable with calculated risk. I'm not comfortable with reckless risk.
Yeah.
But calculated risk I'm comfortable with. And you have to have a stomach. Like, I don't know, am I going to sell art next month? Am I going to sell any, like, what if I don't sell anything? Like I got no money, right? And I got all these bills to pay. So you have to be comfortable with that up and down.
Yeah.
Because every month you start fresh again. Like there's no contracts. There's no consistent sales. It's a lot of one-off.
Yeah.
We get repeat clients, which is our best clients. But nobody's coming in every month and buying a piece of art.
So then what do you think it is? Do you think it's like trusting that you've built a brand or you've built an identity in the art space that people just like, you're being talked about in different circles and you're just waiting for that door to open?
I think so. And I think it's like blind confidence, blind trust.
Yeah.
Or
it's unsettling.
It's faith too, right? Like I gotta believe, like Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
So I think you have to believe. You have to always be hopeful. Because if you're not hopeful, you're just going to spiral. And I've had moments in my life where I'm like, oh my God, like what if, like during the pandemic, like what if, nothing happens? I'm going to go bankrupt.
Yeah.
And I guess I always say the worst case scenario is I go bankrupt and I go live with my parents in Vernon in their basement. That's my worst case scenario, right?
Yeah,
like, and I would survive.
Yeah.
I know I could get another job. Like I know I could go find a job if I had to shut both businesses down.
Yeah.
That happens. Well, what can you do?
Yeah, I find that your industry specifically, it's like it's organic growth.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of pieces behind the scenes that kind of like increase your chance of organic growth.
Yeah. And I got to be careful with what artists I bring in and what artists I move out. And I got to be careful about the furniture that I bring in. And like I don't do it recklessly, but I am analytical, and I think that helps. And I think what helps me is that, probably one of the better decisions I ever made was to go to business school as a non-business person, because it gave me the rigor to look at decisions in a way that maybe lots of entrepreneurs that didn't go to business school look at those decisions.
Yep.
I mean, there's certainly tons of millions of entrepreneurs who never even went to school, and they tell you who they are.
They're fine.
But we all know, right? But for me, it gave me the rigor to look at a problem and say, okay, wait, like anytime someone starts giving me numbers and costs, I'm like, I got to put this in a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I got to start like mapping this out. Like I need to see what this looks like in a visual form in a spreadsheet.
It's a good skill to have.
Yeah. Like I'm not just throwing numbers on the back of a napkin. I'm like analyzing like when we got our new space, I'm like analyzing every year and every number and, how much can we pay for our leasehold improvements versus the rent and like, what's the tolerance there?
It's very, it's very clinical.
I know, right?
That's not,
which is weird because I'm in like the creative industries.
But it's like the perfect, it's a great mix. This has been really cool.
Yeah, thank you. This is fun.
Thanks to Laval and Janet for
Yeah,
making this happen
so
by
I'm just going
accident.
to tell you
Tell the
the
story.
story because
Yeah, for sure.
I had a big art show the night before with Sheila Kernan. So I didn't leave the gallery until like, I'm going to say 1:30. I was freaking exhausted. So I'm laying in my bed and Janet, this is like 2:30 on Saturday afternoon. And she texts me and she's like, hey, Patty, I got a last minute opening for dinner. Do you want to come over? Jan's cooking. And I'm like, oh God, I don't want to come over because I'm so tired. Like, I just want to lay in my bed. And then I actually texted my son and I'm like, I just got invited for dinner, but there's like a professional chef there. He's like, go. I'm like, you're right. I got to eat. So I had a shower. I got in my car. I'm like, I'm going to drive so that I don't drink. And then I'm like, I know I'm not going to be tired the next day.
Yep.
So it was like this close to actually saying, no, I'm too tired. And then we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that speaks to that, like the organic growth idea and community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
those two, you kind of got to put yourself, you got to show up in different situations, and it's just the community that you're involved with,
Yeah.
right? That just keeps opening doors. And
Yeah. And if I had to say one thing for entrepreneurs or people in business, it's like you've got to find a way to give back or contribute to your community. It's so important. Just makes for a better city for all us to live in.
I agree. I end the show with one question.
Yes.
When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
It goes to like innovation. Like when you say Calgary to me, I think of a city that innovates, a city with a heartbeat. Like I think we always strive to be more Calgary. I think we're full of people who are always looking for ways to do things differently and execute on that.
Your insight into the city is very unique. Like that heartbeat idea with the creatives.
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
that's a very like soulful connection to the city.
Well, it's like the fabric of our
Yeah.
community, right?
Yeah.
And the arts community in Calgary is like alive and well, and it's beating. And I say that as someone who was part of AU Arts for a long time. And all of that comes down in like from the hill,
Yeah.
comes down into our community and all the other forms of art.
Amazing. It's been really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
I've heard the name Gibson Fine Arts for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't buy art. I'm not like, but I've heard about it for so long. So when you sat across from me at that dinner and Laval said like, I was like, oh, fuck, this is cool. Yeah. So anyways, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for doing this.
It was a total pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks.